Hi, welcome. So I'm Kathleen, and today I want to talk to you about one of my absolute favorite subjects, which is watercolor. I happen to love and adore watercolor, and watercolor is just a type of paint. Like other types of paint, acrylic, oil, even pastels, they all start with a pigment. But what gets done to that pigment kind of determines whether or not it becomes a watercolor, an oil paint, an acrylic paint, or a pastel. And I'm going to focus on watercolor. So watercolor, they take that pigment and they apply a binder to it. And that binder allows the pigment to stick and flow with water. You can get, I'm going to show you what I have laid out on my studio table, which you currently can't see, but I'm going to turn that down to that in just a second. So you can get watercolors in a tube like this, okay? It's got the binder, it's already in a liquid form, and the binder is attached so that when you pull this out, you can paint with it. It's all done, okay? You can get, you know what, I'm going to rotate my camera, so I'll be right back. Okay, so here we go. I've adjusted my the view so that you can actually see my studio table and what all I've laid out here. So watercolors come in tubes like this. They're amazing. That's actually what I put into these containers. The way I paint, I don't just keep it in the tube. I put it in here and then it dries out. Okay. Now what I want you to notice is that, okay, hello. Sometimes when you paint, okay, so when you choose to paint like this, you have to keep an eye on your paints, because like this one is practically gone, right? There's nothing there. So that's a container that I kind of need to either clean out or figure out how to use the rest of the last little bit. But it will get, you'll get chunks, if you will. And so when you add water, okay, it'll moisten that back up again so that you can continue to use it. It's just dehydrated, if you will. So this is one thing that you can do, and you'll get to kind of see later. I realized that I needed to check on them because they usually look like this. It's not chunky. It kind of forms what looks like just a dry paste at the bottom. I was like, oh, I need to go through these. And so I'm going to move these out of the way a little bit. And I usually have them stacked by color family and whatnot, but that's my own system. So that's watercolor in a tube. A lot of times people will put those onto a painting palette that has wells on it, which brings me to my next thing. These are watercolors in a pan. So watercolors also come in a pan form. So I'm going to open up. I happen to like this particular palette immensely because it comes with all of the core basic colors that I need, and because it comes with most of these kinds of palettes that are intended for travel, so you can paint outside. You can take them with you when you're sketching and doing things like that. However, I tend to use these still in my studio. I like this for detail work, and you'll see that you're able to blend and use the size to blend color. Now, some of you may notice that these are iridescent in nature, and we'll talk about what those are in just a moment. But pan watercolors, it's just like what's in the tube, except it doesn't have the water in it. It's already been dehydrated. In a lot of ways, what I'm doing with my watercolor tubes is I'm creating just a very large pan watercolor by dropping them into a plastic container. So in many ways, I've just created the same thing, just with a larger amount. But these are absolutely amazing. Now, I very recently came across, this is another pan, which I've not actually used yet, and I'm absolutely dying to get into this one, so that I can start painting with it, if I could open it today. So you're going to notice how pretty and clean it is on the inside, but, y'all, so this is all shiny. These are iridescent pan watercolors. I have never seen anything like this, and I cannot wait to use this. Look at how pretty this is. I mean, look at how shiny. I can't wait. And like this one right here, and let's see if I can get that up there so you can actually see. It's so sparkly. I can't wait. But anyway, pan watercolor. This one is iridescent. This one is Paul Rubens. This one is Lucas. By the way, I do not get anything whatsoever for telling you my favorite watercolor brands or varieties. This is just my personal preferences. So speaking of, when it comes to tube watercolors, I prefer Daniel Smith is my preference, along with my Maria Blue. These are the ones that these are my go-to. So if I'm using a watercolor out of a tube, it's typically going to be one of these. I occasionally get some others, like every now and then I get something weird, like I've got a Winsor Newton in here. So just so that you can understand, this is my tub of watercolors in a tube. I might have a problem. But this gives you an idea of, I just store these like this. When I use them, you can see where I've squeezed out paint, and then I put them back in. But typically I'll empty an entire tube into one of these, and then I just wait for it to dry, unless I'm going to use it right away. Okay, so we've talked about pans, we've talked about tubes. Most of you are probably familiar with watercolor pencils. I absolutely love the Faber-Castell watercolor pencils. They are to die for. They are smooth, they blend well, they're just delightful. And because I have obsession issues with having every single color I can possibly get my hands on, I have the big set that's 3 layers deep, because then that way I get all the colors. It just makes my life a little bit easier when there's something that I want to do and I need something more defined, more precise. I'm going to then come in a lot of times with a watercolor pencil versus using a brush. Now I will come in with a brush as well and use the pan colors, but I do like a good watercolor pencil. Now here's the other thing. Watercolors also come in a crayon form. Now, I say crayon. This is Crayon d'Ache of Switzerland. They're water-soluble wax pastels. So there's what they're calling them. I call them a watercolor crayon. These are amazing. You can use these wet. I just realized that I'm pushing too far forward on the table. You can use these wet. So I can dip these into water and paint with them. With basically pure pigment. It is awesomeness. And again, because I have issues with having all the colors, this is their full color collection, at least that they had at the time when I purchased this. These are amazing. I love these as well. You're going to notice that they last for a very long time. I've had this for years. When I was painting very heavily, I use these all the time. And you can still see, like, now some colors I just don't use very much, but some of these that I have used I've used them a lot, and they're still very much almost in a full stick. Like, it's unbelievable the lasting power that these things have. So that's another reason why I like these. I like these, and I like the watercolor pencils because of their lasting quality. I do not like wasting supplies or materials. And when it comes to sometimes some detail work or being able to come back in with other layers of color and washes, there is nothing like the water-soluble wax pastels, otherwise called a watercolor crayon, and the colored pencils. These are amazing. These live right by my table. Because of that, I use them all the time. Now, let's talk about my second favorite source of watercolor. So this is, oh, I gotta hold it upside down so that you can actually see this. I forget that I have yet to resolve my camera angle coming from over the side. This is Doc Martens. Doc Martens make a radiant concentrated watercolor. These are amazing. These are going to give you such an incredible pigment. This one is almost empty, so you're, I don't know, you may not be able to tell, but sometimes the pigment will gather at the bottom. And so you always want to make sure you shake these when you use them, because the pigment does fall to the bottom and you don't want it to kind of get dried out or stuck down there. So shaking any kind of liquid watercolor that you have is important. And I can tell that I may have to do this for a little bit because I can still see, like I'm looking here and I can see that it's still solid right there. That means that that pigment is still there. And then you can see how you can kind of see through right here. That means that I've mixed in pigment from that, but I still need to shake this up to get that to be mixed into the water that's in there. These are amazing. They have 3 different distinct sets of these. They're one of my favorite go-to things. Now, along with those, and even what I put in the container, I have some different techniques that I'm able to use because I use predominantly a liquid source, which does sometimes make a difference. These are like truly some of my all-time favorites. I want all 3 sets. I do not currently have them, but I use them a lot. Like I barely have any of this one left. But I do use that significantly. I'll talk about this little tool in just a second. Pearlex is a type of pigment. So it's just a powder in there. And it'll tell you what it is. It's an interference gold. This is, I don't know if this is a Pearlex brand or not. But these are just pigments. So I mentioned before we started this that every paint, regardless of whether or not it's watercolor, acrylic, or whatever, it starts its life as a pigment. If it's a pastel, it's got very little binder and it's rolled so that when you use a pastel, oh my gosh, pastels are luscious. It just glides on, right? Because it's mostly pigment is what you're applying to your ground. Watercolor, it's got a binder added to the pigment. So these are just straight up pigments. Now, these are iridescent in nature. Pearlex is a brand name, and they make like an oh, look, it makes little, it comes up and bounces. I know you can't quite see that, but I can. That's kind of cool. And they're astounding. You can create some iridescent shades. You can get something that's called interference so that from one angle it looks like one thing, one color, from another angle it looks like another. All you need to do these and use these as a watercolor is a binder. And I was looking to see if there was a clear side on this one, and there's not. Is a binding agent. And there are kits out there that will allow you to craft and create your own oil paints, your own acrylic paints, because it has all the binding and it has the binders in it. I think Schminky is a brand that might even have one that lets you then pick and choose and decide between here's your choice of pigments, so you can blend your own colors straight from a pigment, which that is pretty cool. But, okay, and this is the largest container of this I have ever seen or purchased. This is what I get for buying something off of Amazon. Gum arabic is a binder. It's food grade, so that's part of what cracks me up. I thought this was a much smaller container. Like, I literally thought it was going to be like this size because this size will last you forever. I'm going to be like 90, 100 years old before I even come close to putting a dent in this container. So you can mix some gum arabic in with these pigments and use it and create your own base for your watercolor. It's great. Again, I bought this off of Amazon. I thought it was a much smaller container, so please pay attention to the size of the container you are purchasing. It doesn't have to be food grade, but any kind of gum arabic you can use. You can find it in a local art store. I couldn't get down to my local art store before doing this. But your local art store will carry something like this. It's a great thing to have on hand. And then the last thing I'm going to show you are, this is by a company called Schminky. They make some of the most incredible pastels I've ever had the pleasure of working with. They also make this, and it comes in different colors. You can get various and sundry metal tone colors. So it's a powdered pigment. It has the binder is already mixed in. It also comes with all kinds of warning signs on it. It's awesome. When you work with art materials, pay attention to the label. Might make you feel like you're being a little dangerous there every now and then. It's also very flammable. So you got to pay attention because it contains aluminum in this one. And this is where I created a section here. I tend to use the silver and the gold most often. I have a bronze. I have variations of gold because gold comes in many different color families. So I have those here. And then I can just wet this and then I can use it. So it comes in that powdered form. So these are the core things, my core supplies for painting. If you have questions about watercolor paint, the different pieces here between Pearlex, Schminke, this you can get at a local, if you have a good quality local art supply store, you'll be able to find this. I always recommend that whenever possible, if you can purchase from your local art supply store, it would help if I actually put these this direction so you could read the labels. If you have a good quality art local art supply store, I highly encourage you to go there. We have one. I live in Texas. I live in the Houston area. We have Texas Art Supply. They are absolutely amazing. They literally have everything that I could possibly ask for and then some. It's also a fun field trip. When you need some sources of inspiration, go to the local art supply store. It'll do you good. But you can get, I know that you can purchase the something like this at your local supply store. The tracing paper that I had in another video, you can get that at your local supply store as well. Sometimes that's found in a drafting section. Back in my interior design days, that was something that was part of a drafting skill set. You use that to sketch out and draw and transfer information from one plan to another, and you would use the tracing paper that's on a roll like that. I also have pastels. I don't do as much pastel work as I used to. Who knows? That may show up later. But oh, let's talk brushes, because while paint is important, brushes are equally important. The brushes that you use matter. So this has to be my absolute favorite brush. As you can see, it's well used, it's well loved. I do my best to take care of it. There's always going to be some discoloration right here from the sheer volume of which I use this paintbrush. This is a Robert Simmons Skyflow brush. And oh, it is so nice. Large swaths of water. It holds pigment well. You can apply just thin pieces of it. This is an amazing brush. This is the 2-inch one. Absolutely love this brush. I also have, now he has a less expensive line, if you will, and this is the Simply Simmons, and this is a filbert. It's also a large scale one. A lot of the work that I do, I'm applying large swashes of water along with pigment because I do mostly abstract work. When I get ready to do detailed work, I pull out, and a lot of people find these to be kind of funny, but I absolutely love these things. Yes, I have. So this is kind of just a cheap, well, I mean, it's sort of cheap. Oh, what is this? It's a Kolinsky Sable, so not so cheap. I was like, oh, where did I get this? I try to keep the cover as much as possible if I can, so that when I clean it, I can keep that tip protected. But I will eventually lose that bad boy. I happen to love these. So if you've ever seen these are, they're basically, it's a paintbrush with a water well, and it comes in varying tips. You can get medium, but they're all the round tip. They tend to be very fine. I might have found a flat tip in there somewhere. You can see, like, this one is extraordinarily well used. It's probably my favorite. And as you can see, it's a smaller tip brush. Actually, maybe you can't see it because I'm hiding it amongst the other things. So it's a finer tip paintbrush. But I love these. It's kind of a, if you will, a modern invention. It's not a traditional watercolor brush, but the fact that it has a water well in it, this saves me a huge amount of time. I can clean my brush off. There's a reason why I have paper towels on my table. I can clean this out without having to constantly dirty a cup of water, which is delightful. There's nothing like having this nasty, dirty cup of water sitting around. But I can clean my brush off onto the paper towel, clean out the paint color that I was using, squeeze a little bit more water down, and pick up a new color. It's a huge time saver for me. So I love these. And so I have a huge variety of them. Some of them I haven't even used yet. Oh yeah, that's right. Because I found these. I found the flat tip, the flat brush. Awesome. Here, let's see. There you go. So you can see that. But you can get these from any store. Any local store will carry these. They are fantastic. I'm trying to see if I've got another small tip one. So here's another one that's another small tip. Oh, it's still focusing on what's in the background on the table. So hopefully you can kind of see that. It's a kind of a small tip. They are amazing to use. I like things that make my life easier. And these are my basic tools. I don't really, in terms of paintbrushes, don't use more than that. Because I do so much abstract work, I don't need to have a whole lot of high quality brushes. These really are it. I mean, this is my most expensive paintbrush that I own. And it's worth every single penny. Your supplies that you use, the materials that you use, the better the quality, the better detail and work you're able to produce. And I know that sounds kind of strange because I know people who use some of the cheapest brushes around and they do incredible work. But I have found, especially with some of this with the washes, this was the best investment that I made. I think you can get these for around $50 in some places. It was a white sable instead of the red sable. And it was around $50, a little bit more. But this was the best investment in terms of a brush for me for doing big, broad washes. I cannot recommend this brush enough if you are interested in doing watercolor. It has come to my rescue on a number of occasions as well because I can add additional water to lighten something if it came out too dark. The last thing that I want to share with you is a tool that most people don't see anymore. And that is this. This is an airbrush tool. And you're thinking to yourself, well, where's the compressor? Well, the compressor are my lungs. Okay? You can take, and this end goes into your paint. So whether I'm using a container that has paint in it, okay, or I'm using a liquid, okay. I've also done various and sundry iridescent paints. I've used liquid acrylics with this. It's getting crusty on some edges from having not rinsed it off. It's metal. Get a metal one. Do not get one of the plastic ones. They will last you forever. I've had this bad boy for a very long time. And it comes with a little tip here. This is the end that you're going to blow into. So you can blow into this and it gives you the appearance of having used an airbrush with that very fine stipple effect. And depending upon how hard you blow into it, depends on how fine or thick you end up with that splatter. So you can experiment with this. It is a fantastic tool to have. I even have one for markers, if you can believe that. I have something that will allow me to take like a marker tip that has the long tips on them for like calligraphy and a painter tip. And I have something that will let me do the exact same thing, but with a marker tip. Just as a side note, just because I happen to have some very strange supplies that I use. There is one other supply that I realized that I have not shown you. Actually, I realize there's two of them that I haven't shown you. Ah! Whoa! Oh, hello. And so one is here. So I use a variety of sponges. They have different, it gives me different effects. You can see, like you can kind of take some parts away so that when you dab down, you get different effects. I use salt. I use alcohol. So in terms of watercolor supplies, but there is a supply that, okay, so I just bought it. So bear with me because I haven't had some in forever. So this is called masking fluid. So this is a Winsor Newton masking fluid. Again, your local art supply store will have these. And like all things, you got to always shake it. You can see how it's really yellow down here. You want to shake that up so that it's not bright yellow, but a pale yellow. Masking fluid allows you to lay down a mask over an area that you do not want paint to go onto. And so I'm looking for, now it says it's designed for paper, but I have an idea and I'm going to test it on some canvas because I want to do something. If you've seen some of my other videos, which I'm looking for my sketch, and I have missed, it's hiding. This is what happens in my studio. Things hide from me quite often. That's okay. I have sketched out, okay, you're not going to be able to see anything on here because there's a circle on here, but I had sketched out some standing stones, and the technique that I want to try to use, I need to mask out the stones so that they're not impacted by what I do in the background. So this is going to let me do that. I can protect portions of my work by putting this art masking fluid down on top of it. Wait till it dries. Okay. And then do my painting. When I'm finished with that part, I can peel off the mask. And yes, you heard me right. You just peel it right off. And then I'll be able to paint over the areas that I had masked. So I'm really excited to try this out. I want to test it on some. Maybe turn it that way. I want to test it out on some canvas that I have set off to the side. So I hope that you found this to be at least interesting or educational from a standpoint of there's lots of options when it comes to watercolor. A lot of times you'll have people who say, oh, it's just the stuff in the tubes. But it comes in a pan form. It comes in a color. It comes in a pencil. It comes in a crayon. You can get pigments. You can get a pigment and make your own color by adding a binder. I do that sometimes with a lot of these iridescent ones because iridescent, I had never seen it in a pan before. If this works, I don't have to always use this to turn it into a paint. I'm very excited. That's very exciting for me. So keep in mind that watercolor is greatly flexible. You can get everything from very pale colors to very intense colors. A lot of times I've had people say, well, you can't get, the intensity of the color that you can in other mediums. However, this little bottle right here will beg to differ. I can get some pretty intense coloration out of a liquid watercolor than I see in some others. And then just to give you an idea, so these are not finished, so these are kind of in progress, but these are using, okay, a liquid, that radiant liquid watercolor that you saw before, and using some printmaking techniques, able to create a ground and a sky, or at least a background and a foreground. So there's one here, and the yellow, can you see how bright and intense that yellow is? Now this one is far more muted, but in the purples. So the color here is up here is more muted, but the intensity of the color here is not. And again, please remember, these are not finished. And then you've got, again, printmaking techniques that are used to apply different patterns. So you can get some very intense, very heavy coloration from using a watercolor and from using a liquid watercolor. These are my test canvases, by the way. This is how I am able to go through and do a test. And then when I really want to know if something is going to work on my the canvas that I have, I use the Frederick's watercolor canvas, but I have it in the roll. But I happened to catch this at one point, and they have some pre-made wrapped canvases, but they're skinny, right? I'd have to frame these. That's the only thing that I don't like about these. But I use these to test when I have a technique or an idea or something that I want to test and see if it will work on the canvas. I will use these to do that, so that I'm not going straight to one of my larger canvases and then finding out that it does not work on my full size canvas. That is not the time for me to find out that something is not going to work. I'd rather do that here on something small. So for those of you who wanted to know what brand, who are interested in knowing what kind of brand canvas that I use, it's Frederick's Archival Watercolor Canvas. You can purchase small ones already wrapped like this, but again, it's not a gallery wrap. It's just a smaller one, and so this is something that would need to be framed. But you can purchase it like this. You can also purchase it by the roll, which is what I've done, and it's a fantastic medium to use for painting watercolors. So I hope this has helped you get some insight into watercolor, some of the supplies, the various forms that it comes in, kind of where paint gets its start from in terms of the base pigment. And I look forward to sharing. If you have ideas, if you have a favorite watercolor brand, or you have a favorite technique that you like to use, feel free to drop a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Happy painting, and I will see you next time.